morning, everyone. We are going to take just a few minutes to let folks arrive, and then we'll get started. Thank you for being here this morning, and please feel free to put in chat where you're joining us from today and who you represent. Welcome. Hello. Good morning. We are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to all of you. Again, please feel free to put your name and affiliation and where you're joining us from in the chat. We are going to have time to connect later on in smaller groups, but for now, we would love to hear where you're joining us from. I'm Amanda Cather. I'm the Mid-Atlantic Senior Program Manager for American Farmland Trust and also a pastured livestock producer based in Maryland. I use she, her pronouns, and my colleagues from AFT, Ashley Brucker and Rachel McDonald, are also joining us this morning. I'm very excited for today's conversation with our discussion leaders about effective ways to engage farmers around healthy soils. And a conversation with all of you around that as well. We all know that soil health can have multiple benefits for farm productivity, resilience, and environmental stewardship, but I think we also know that it can be challenging to make sure that soil health management isn't just another task for farmers, but instead is integrated into the way we think about our farm operations every day. So today, we're going to hear about some techniques that you can use to engage the farmers you work with, learn from some service providers who are on the ground doing this work, and have a discussion about how you might be able to use some of these methods in your own outreach to farmers. So as we get started, I'd just like to say that these webinars are sponsored by a Conservation Innovation Grant from Pennsylvania and NRCS. And that project is focused on supporting farmers and service providers and deepening their knowledge of soil health principles and practices through a series of virtual and in-person learning circles in partnership with Penn State Women in Agriculture Network, PASA Sustainable Agriculture, and the Pennsylvania Soil Health Coalition. We want you to feel really comfortable asking questions during our discussions today, so please put them in the chat. We're going to keep an eye on that, and we'll get them to our discussion leaders. If there's something burning, you can also feel free to raise your hand, unmute, and say it in person. Otherwise, keep yourself muted if you're not speaking. And I'm very excited to hand it off to Ashley Brucker, AFT's Agriculture Conservation Innovations Deputy Director. Get us started.
Thanks so much, Amanda. Yeah, so just to kind of echo what Amanda said, we had a great talk yesterday, and I am just going to dive into high-level ideas that go off of what Steve and Lisa shared with us yesterday. If you weren't able to join us, we are recording both of these sessions today and yesterday, and we will have those posted. I really recommend you go back and watch Lisa and Steve. I think I could probably sum up what I'm about to share by just saying, do what they do. They've been doing this for a long time, so it's probably not as easy as that, but they are definitely a couple of the folks in the industry, along with so many others, who really have kind of dialed in how we really connect with people. So I have actually adjusted my presentation since watching both of them yesterday to emphasize what they said and to build on that a little bit, and we'll continue building on that through this session. So I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. I have a short presentation for everyone. And hopefully everybody can see my screen here. Great. So yeah, yesterday, Steve started us off in his talk by, commenting that everybody communicates, but few connect. So in today's session, we're going to really drill down into those methods, share some tools, maybe some suggestions for connecting, not just communicating. We're also going to highlight a few variations on models beyond our standard field day, because let's be real, our standard field day isn't the standard anymore, right? On the screen here, you see farmers looking at a field, which we all go to. Those are still very valuable, but we also see things like what we're in right now, a virtual setting as a way to share information, small group settings or round tables or learning circles. And then we also have the impact that large conferences or large gatherings present to us with their kind of light touch methods. And in all of those, you can connect with your audience, with additional target audiences, if you have adapted your message accordingly. We do need to recognize the ever-changing diversity in agriculture. Today, a wider and wider variety of people find themselves in a leadership position on a farm, and there's no longer a stereotypical farmer or farm product, just like there's no longer a stereotypical event like the field day. Farm and landowners include all people from all walks of life, often with varying degrees of experience and background. Farms are located in the urban areas of our biggest cities to the rural areas that a lot of us are used to working in, way out in the prairie lands of Kansas or wherever that may be. So for many, farming can also be a whole new realm. It's no longer that multi-generational aspect, although that is still there as well. And there's additional pressures from those multi-generational teams of folks in farming, but we have to adapt to multiple people. And I apologize, I'm also admitting people into this while I'm talking. So sorry, I had to pause for a moment there. Right, so we've got all these different people that are entering into agriculture with varying needs. Some of them don't even know what they need yet. And the thing to recognize is that since this industry is constantly changing, that we, as the resource providers, also need to change with it. So it's our responsibility to provide everyone with the necessary tools and resources and to share that information in an engaging and interactive way that resonates with them. So yesterday, Steve referred to all of us as marketers selling soil health, in a sense. But our challenge is, how do we do that with all of these different audiences, with the ever-changing landscape? And understanding, that we need to adjust our approach to selling soil health, that's kind of the easy part, right? Like someone can tell us we need to change our approach. But identifying how and where we make those changes is a different story. And we're going to dial down into that today. And we're actually going to break out later on in this session to do that on kind of a small group way so that we can all hear from you. Just like there's no silver bullet for soil health and no one answer for all farmers, the same is true in our messaging. We can't take the same message to different events with the different audiences and expect the same results. It's important, again, that we as resource providers identify how we are being successful in our messaging now. So what works for us now? And then identify what our ultimate goal is that would really give us that wow factor, and then build the bridge on how to get there. This is an exercise some of you may have seen if you've participated in facilitated strategic planning meetings. It's called the Now, How, Wow, or the bridging exercise. And it can be used to adapt a presentation, so you can really use it on a minute scale. But it can also be used to identify what audiences you want to reach and how to adjust for greater audience outreach. With this activity, we are going to start with the now. So what type of audience do you see the most? What is the purpose of your messaging to that audience? This could be even broader to think about the audiences and the resources and messaging is currently marketed to. So thinking about what you do really well and to who right now. And then where do you want to move to? So who is that potential audience? Is it the vegetable farmers? Is it cut flower farmers? Is it urban farmers? And what does the messaging look like to share with them? Or what is the potential messaging that you want to share with your current audience? So you can kind of mix and match some of these things where maybe you've got your traditional large commodity farmers that you're engaging, and you're engaging them on no-till, but you want to take it up a level and engage them on soil health management systems and take them to that whole system approach. How do you adapt that messaging to engage them? And that's where you start figuring out the exact methods in the how. Does it look like virtual engagement? Is that the way to engage different audiences or share a different message? Is it small group discussions? Maybe it's integrating some interactive demos, or maybe it's adjusting your message to share in a less technical way. And that doesn't mean that you're dumbing down your message or that you're talking down to people because they don't understand. It's just not the technical talk that we normally use. And this is where I really refer back to Lisa and Steve yesterday, where they were really good about using the exact level of technical language that was appropriate for the audience that they were addressing. So again, be thinking about, what is going to move you forward to that goal that you want to reach in order to make that change. And this is what the whole thing looks like in one big picture. You're building that full bridge, you're identifying the change, you're identifying the goal, and you're identifying how to get there. One of the ways that I mentioned is interactive demos. This group is from a lot of conservation districts. We have a lot of NRCS folks on here, so I'm sure that you all have seen or been a part of soil health demos. So I'm not gonna dive a bunch into this, but I just want to give you some things to think about when you are putting together your own soil health demos as a tool to move you in your kind of bridge journey. Melissa and Megan are also going to be talking about some of this in just a moment, and how they have adapted various models and how those have been successful in engaging a specific target audience. The thing about soil health demos is that sometimes we can't go out into the field and build that relationship with a farmer like Lisa and Steve mentioned. They also mentioned building the relationship before you go out into the field and start talking to them about what they can personally improve on their field. And a lot of times the place to do that is at conference, is at a field day, engaging them through a demonstration and showing them what could be or what the possibilities are out there. And the nice thing about that is that it lets them see the possibilities while it doesn't really, you don't have to worry about offending them and offending what they are already doing on their field. Like, it can be very general. So this is a presentation that Stephanie McLean, an NRCS soil health specialist in Minnesota, shared with me on another presentation we did together. And I just thought it translated really well for our use today. So very quickly, when you're doing demos, preparation is key. In collecting soils in the appropriate way, collecting them from the appropriate locations, making sure you have permission to take soils. I know that sometimes we all see those really kind of hard to look at fields that maybe don't have the best soil health practices currently on them, but that doesn't mean that we can just jump out of the car and go dig a hole in their field. So be sure to work with all of your neighbors in collecting soils from the appropriate places. Make sure that you're allowing time. This is specific to the slake demo. you're allowing time for those samples to dry down correctly. When you're doing a demo, the last thing you want is for the demonstration to not perform the way that you were anticipating it would. So collecting your soils from a known source, so you know the practices on that field, and then preparing them, allowing them to dry down, allowing that time for those soils to dry down correctly is really paramount. One trick that a lot of people have tried, you have to be very vigilant, is you can dry your soil samples in the oven, very low heat.
No.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if someone is yelling no about drying the soils in the oven or is yelling at somebody on their end. Okay. All right. In my experience, I have had success in drying my soils in the oven on a very, 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 very low heat, the lowest you can get it to go, over a very long course of time with the oven door open. This is not ideal. Ideally, you want to allow them to air dry out in the sun, put a fan on it. That's your ideal. Drying in the oven is your last resort. If you need something to happen, you need to get those soils ready. Just be careful you don't over dry them. You can burn off the glues and ruin the aggregation. So again, be prepared, prepare accordingly. Storage, again, you can store your soil clods for up to a year as long as you do so appropriately. Try to store them in a rigid container. You can store them in a bag. A lot of times they'll jostle around a little bit when you do that, so they break apart a little bit more, but you can store them up to a year. Again, always test before using. If they've been sitting there for a while, you want to make sure that they, again, perform the way that you would like them to. When setting up your demos, make sure that you set them up in a way that is going to be the most impactful for people to view them. So have a nice white background behind them. There's some folks who differ in if you want to label your demonstration tubes or not. I know some people who do this that don't like to put labels on it in case something goes wrong. My opinion is that we prepare enough, nothing will go wrong, or we can explain why something goes wrong. So I encourage you to label the types of soils that you are using in the tube so that people can look at them and understand and be reminded of what those types of soils are and why they're performing the way that they are. And then it's go time, basically. Once you've done all your prep, you've done all of your setup. These are just some guidelines on how to perform, again, the slate demo specifically, because that seems to be the most impactful and most popular demonstration that a lot of folks like to see and like to do. Just make sure that you are explaining to people what the different soils are, what their physical differences are. Allow people to really look at them. If you have extra soil clods, I would recommend passing them around, encouraging people to break them open. Make sure when you are putting them in the water that you're placing them in gently. You're not just throwing them in or dropping them in. That extra force can cause them to break apart when you don't want them to. And try and get people to gather around. If you can get people up to the area or to walk by the area that you're performing the demonstration, that's going to allow them to see things even more closely, like the air bubbles coming out. All of those things really make a difference. So most of us have seen the equipment, the professional grade equipment that's done with, that's used for the slate test or the rainfall simulator or whatever the case may be. You don't have to have those to do this test. On your screen, you see lots of different varieties. I have used all of these. The one that's not on here is the little strainer that you might use in your kitchen sink. It costs $2 from Walmart. Those things fit on top of a jar really nicely too. Just make sure you get the one with the fine wire mesh in it. So you really can set these up in a variety of ways in order for you to make it more accessible to people. Again, get the audience involved in whatever kind of demo that you're doing. It doesn't take any kind of technical training or anything to place the soil clod in the water. And it's really more impactful and it'll stay with people more if they're able to put their hands on things and be involved. So on the slide here, you see that we've got a couple of women adding the soil clods in, have them describe what's happening. They can look and see and tell you what's going on, and then you can interpret that as to why it's happening. Same with soil pits. If you can construct a soil pit that is safe for people to see roots, to get down and see the roots on a close scale, please do that, or allow for people to gather around so that there is enough space for them to see what's going on. The rainfall simulator is another great example where people can see things happening in real time. Now, like I said, we have a lot of times where we are in a virtual setting. And so how do we do this in that case? And that's where there's access to videos like this one that you can place on a loop or you can play long term. I've also used this one set up at conferences on a laptop where it doesn't make sense for me to run a Slake demo over and over and over again. So you can have things like this in your wheelhouse as well, where you have that option to show what's happening. You just have to do the work ahead of time instead of doing the demo in real time. The important thing, and I'm gonna stop sharing here, 1 minute. All right, the important thing is to just really be creative in how you are engaging people and getting them to think through the message that you're trying to share with them. And that can look like a lot of different things. I've used these Starbucks cups that I have here, and I filled them with different size round objects to talk about the differences in particle size for silt, soil, and clay so that people can visualize that. I've also transported, smaller samples of soil in jars. If anybody's a jar collector, that, you have that ice cream jar that just can't go, you can't throw it away. So allowing people to pass that around and they can actually smell the soil if you can't be out in a field. So getting really creative with how we are engaging people can really make the difference in how we adjust our messaging. So I'm going to pause here for questions and open up the chat and see what people might want to ask. Or any comments from anybody that has done this and has had success in it.
Hi, Ashley. This is Elizabeth Beggins. I couldn't quite discern what was in the one picture, sort of top above the various forms of netting you could use for slate tests. There was something in the top picture that I couldn't, was it like produce containers or something? I couldn't quite make it out.
Yes, that's potato or onion sacks cut down. So like was it the red netting or was it the black netting? So the red netting is an onion.
It wasn't netting. It looked like containers of some sort, but maybe I totally misinterpreted.
So in that slide, I'll just describe everything. There was a ball jar that had an onion sack or potato sack that has the fine netting on it that was attached. You can do that with using the top ring that you get off of those jars, off those canning jars, to attach the netting in, or you can do it with a rubber band. There was another one that was like a clear drinking cup, basically clear plastic or glass drinking cup with that netting placed in. Someone had also used landscape netting that they purchased online that is kind of what's used to stop erosion, basically, and cut that in strips and then stuck that down into a cup as well. So those were the three things that were on there. And then there was also the standard Slake demo. There was the box that showed all of the Slake demo stuff that's in the big toolbox, if you've seen that before.
Probably what I was looking at.
Yeah. Yep, great question. Yeah, anything that's got like lots of little holes in it, and stick it in a clear container and you're pretty well good to go on the Slake demo. Another demonstration that I really like to use is the slump demo. I encourage people to look that up as well for something in real time that you don't have to do the dry down process for, and you can do out in people's fields with them.
Ashley,
yes.
would you mind, do you think could make me co-host and then I can help you with admitting folks. I think there are a couple of people in the reading room.
Yes, yes, thank you. So I am going to introduce Melissa and Megan here, and then we'll get some other folks in here. So really quickly, I just want to introduce Melissa Erdman is a district conservation, and Juniata something county. I'm not from Pennsylvania, y'all. I'm down in North Carolina, and she's with Pennsylvania NRCS. We also have Megan Burgess with the Megan Burgess, who was a district conservationist in Kenton, Ohio for 17 years and recently became the state grazing specialist. There's nothing soil about that, sorry. So I'm going to turn it over to them while we continue to admit people and let them share some of their methods for engaging new audiences.
Hey, hi everybody. I am Melissa. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, great. Takes me a minute to get set up in Zoom. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I was asked to talk a little bit today about my experience creating and leading a farmer network in my county, how I've worked to engage producers in soil health conversations and education with the ultimate goal of increasing the adoption of soil health based conservation practices. So I have to laugh. I saw on the agenda that, you know, that these various soil health farmer networks have different names in different places. I've heard them called soil health circles, learning circles. That was a little bit too soft, maybe too feminine for my group. And then I heard of soil health hubs, maybe a little bit too trendy. So my group, we just went with the soil health group. Nothing fancy, but the concept and the structure is all the same. We are focusing on it being a farmer to farmer, a peer to peer learning network. And the point is really to bring a like-minded group of farmers together and really truly create the opportunity for them to network and share ideas specifically on soil health conservation practices. So what is my role and how did we get this started in Juniata County? The group really started in 2020 with a conversation with Lisa Blazier, who is a soil health coordinator with the Stroud Water Research Center. With her position, she was looking to establish different groups or hubs across the Chesapeake Bay watershed. I had known Lisa for a long time, so we had been talking about this idea, and I was really excited. I've been working in Juniata County for almost 15 years now, so you know I had a good feel for farmers in my county that were soil health minded. And it was just a matter of bringing those farmers together. So my role with the soil health group is really, I have no better way to describe it than that little plastic thingy that holds a 6-pack of soda together. That is me. My role is to just provide that structure, to bring everybody together, keep things organized, and just bring everybody together. So I'm going to talk about, you know, a little bit more as far as what my role is in planning the meetings, farmers that I've worked to invite, topics that we discuss. So digging into it a little bit deeper as far as the logistics. I have a farmer host each meeting. We meet in a shop, in a barn, in an equipment shed. It is truly nothing fancy, but it works out really, really well. So each meeting, I talk to a farmer about hosting the meeting in whatever space basically they have available. Like I said, our first meeting was in September of 2020, and that first meeting was in an empty freestall barn. We all brought chairs and we just sat in that barn and had our first 2-hour conversation on soil health and where everybody was at. Typically, since 2020, I've held 2 meetings a year, one in the winter, one in the summer. I try to do the winter one during the day and the summer one in the evening. I structure them to be about 2 hours long. This last meeting, we just had the first week in August. It was 2 hours long, and there was a group that stayed almost till 9:30 in the evening. So well after that meeting had ended, still talking about, where they were at, things they were excited about. So those meetings can go a little longer depending on the discussion. Who to invite? I think this is a really critical point if you're looking at starting this sort of group in your area. I started that very first meeting inviting around 20 farmers. And again, I have been in this county for quite a long time, so that's really an asset. I kind of had a good feel for farmers that were soil health minded, that I thought would benefit, that they're more innovative and kind of further ahead on the soil health adoption curve. And that's where I was targeting these first couple meetings, was to bring those guys together. And I would say at any one meeting, about half the farmers I invite come. Everybody has a lot of things pulling them in different directions. And I truly like the smaller group setting, so that 10 to 15 farmer number is really what I'm hoping for, because it works out well as far as discussion and things like that. Since that first meeting 4 years ago, the group has definitely evolved. I've had people in that original group say, hey, do you mind if I ask this guy to come or my neighbor to come? I've worked with more people since then, so I've thought of some additional people along the way. So still, I would say I'm inviting around 20 to 30 to each meeting. And again, they're certainly growing in size from that first meeting, but I would say I have anywhere from 15 to 20 probably coming to each meeting now. And I would say, as far as agriculture in Juniata County, we have a pretty diverse group. As far as women in the conservation conversation, so far that's just me in the group. But we do represent a lot of different types of agriculture, as far as livestock, cash grain, no-tillers. And the most recent addition to our last couple meeting has been a few organic producers, which has had a great addition to the group. There is so much that continuous no-tillers and organic producers can learn from each other. One of the topics at one of our early meetings was about using untreated seed, which is something organic producers are really experienced with. So I've loved the conversation between those two groups in our group. And again, so topics, I laugh at the learning circle when I was kind of laughing to myself about that group, and I pulled up all these pictures and we're all in a circle. So that group name really does make sense. But these are pictures of our group meetings. Topics that we discuss, I really try to gain interest or gauge interest from the group as far as what they're interested in hearing about, just in my conversations throughout the year about what they're struggling with or what they've read about or heard about. And then we go from there. So our very first meeting was something that a farmer was doing that I had never heard about. So I was sitting there learning from him about his corn sap testing. We've talked about planting green. Quite a few guys in the group are involved with PASA's soil health benchmark study. So we talk about how to look at those Cornell soil health tests, the information we can gauge from those. We've talked about neonicotinoid treated seed, using untreated seed, manure injection, cover crops. We've had 2 different extension people come from Penn State and talk about their research, some of which is being done in Juniata County. And we've had our last meeting featured a farmer down in Franklin County who came up and shared what he's doing in his operation. So, those topics really vary, and it's based on what the farmers in the group are interested in, or even things that I've learned about that I think will interest the people in the group. And another logistic that part of the 6-pack that I do behind the scenes is this, the food and host farmer stipend. So we've used conservation district grant funds or funds through Lisa and the Stroud Water Research Center and grants that she gets to provide food at each of the meetings. You can see the picture down below is me. I've just talked about the slake test demo, and I had it set up right next to my crock pots. So it works out great just to have a meal together. I love looking around the room when we're eating and seeing all of these farmers talking to each other, forging relationships with each other, getting comfortable asking people questions about what they're doing. And then another piece of it, which I take no credit for this is something Lisa through her grants has developed, is the host farmer stipend. I think it is incredibly thoughtful. It's very well received amongst our group. They typically don't even know about it until Lisa hands them that check. But we've had farmers use the host farmer stipend to rent heaters for the space that they're letting us meet in. But it's a great gesture to show that we appreciate their time. If you've ever been in a farmer's shop, you know that it takes time to clean them up, just to even put chairs out. So there's time and effort on their part. So I feel like my part is to help behind the scenes as far as getting food there and compensating them partly for their time in getting a space for us. And we also do fun things. Ashley was just talking about, what can we do to be creative to engage people? And you wouldn't think this activity maybe would go over well with a group of middle-aged men in my group, but we did the Soil Your Undies campaign back in 2021. Two of the things that I was just absolutely thrilled with were the amount of farmers that got their kids involved. They got their kids involved with burying the underwear. They brought them to the meeting. I did the same thing with my kids. We buried a pair of underwear on our babysitter's farm, and it was a great activity in amongst the slake demo to talk about biological activity in the soil. So that was something we really had a lot of fun with. And just a few final things on the things that I've learned. Number one, it's really important for me in creating and managing one of these groups to keep it simple. I am not a professional party planner or a professional meeting organizer. So for me, keeping it simple has kept me moving forward. And if I was planning big, huge meetings and field days that were really time consuming, my role in NRCS, I'm stretched a lot of different ways. So keeping it simple for me makes it much easier to keep these meetings going. And I wouldn't hesitate to ask a coworker or a partnering agency person to help get a group started. That's what Lisa did for me. She gave me great ideas. She provided a little backup when I was nervous at first about what do I talk about and how do I get this organized and started? She was a great and continues to be a great support person for me in these meetings. So I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to a district person or something like that if you have an interest in starting one of these groups in your area. And the third thing, it goes with the keep it simple, is that I text all my meeting invites and reminders. I don't make 20 or 30 phone calls. I don't do a big mailing. I find that farmers more and more texting them. I hate group texts, but I will copy and paste that same text to each farmer and it is easy on my end, and then I can send reminders and things like that. And it just really is a simple way to keep that going. And I don't know why this surprises me, but about 2 or 3 meetings ago, we had some grant money, and I had read myself Gabe Brown's Dirt to Soil book, absolutely loved it, and thought this is, again, it follows with the same concept of farmers learning from other farmers. As a farmer that wrote this book, fantastic advocate for soil health, very well written. I want to buy this book for every group, or for every farmer in my group. So we had a grant that helps support that. And funny story is that I had a farmer in the group, dairy farmer, very busy, 4 kids. He read that book within a week. And he is so on fire. He feels like, his eyes have been opened, the veil is lifted, and he is just on fire about soil health, doing great things. And so don't be surprised the different ways, those groups, again, provide a great format for, different avenues of reaching them. Like Ashley said before, what engages your audience. So don't, discount the effect that some of these books and podcasts. I share podcasts with different guys in my group all the time. Have you listened to this one? Have you listened to this one? And we share those kind of in the off time. And that can be a great topic, way to come up with topics. And at every meeting, I make homemade cookies and whoopie pies. So that helps keeping these guys coming back to every meeting too. So I think that's about all I had. We've had a lot of successes and failures with the group, and coming back to adoption of soil health practices. Ultimately, this is what it's all about, right? We get together and we want to share these things. And so we've had great successes in moving things forward. More acres of cover crop planted, more cover crop mixes, interest in new things that guys weren't interested in before, as far as grazing livestock on cover crops and using drones for cover crops. We've had some failures. We have some struggles this year with planting untreated seed. But again, this group, Ashley's comment in the beginning of her presentation was so on point. This is about connecting and building relationships, and the farmers are sharing these failures with us and how we can learn from them. And we've, as a group, have certainly learned a lot. And I think these small settings are just such a great way to not only build the relationship and their trust with me as a district conservationist in this county, but for me to also hear from them about where they're at and where they're struggling, and bringing in other support people through Penn State or other farmers that have had successes, so that we can move the adoption of soil health practices forward in our county. So, all righty. That's all I had, Amanda.
Melissa, that's amazing. Just thank you so much for sharing that and for doing what you do. It's incredible. I'm sure we will have a lot of folks with questions for you. I think we're going to move on to Megan next, and then if you have questions for either Megan or Melissa, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as Megan's presentation is done. Ashley, would you like to introduce Megan for us?
Sure. Yeah, because I really jumbled it the first time. So Megan Burgess was the district conservationist in Kitten, Ohio for 17 years, and recently became the Ohio State grazing specialist. So welcome, Megan.
Thanks, Ashley. So I'm going to start out my presentation actually with a poll. And so if you have 2 options. Ashley's going to put in the chat the link that you can just click on the link, or if you just want to use your smartphone and take a photo of, or use your camera to do the QR code, that would be wonderful. It's only 2 questions. It shouldn't take you too long. But while you guys are working on that, I'll give you a little bit of background. And Kenton, where I was the district conservationist, is located in Hardin County. And the watershed for the northern half of the county joins the Maumee River and empties into Lake Erie at Toledo. In 2014, Toledo shut down its drinking water treatment plant due to microcystin in the water during an algal bloom. And more than 450,000 people were told not to drink the water or cook with water, bathe with the water, or touch it in any way for multiple days. And this started massive water quality outreach to residents, especially agricultural residents in the Western Lake Erie Basin. And that's because agriculture is the primary land use in the Western Basin. And so then in 2018, American Farmland Trust worked with myself and the neighboring NRCS staff, Tammy Hastings, to offer 3 full-day learning circles that covered soil health, water quality, and pollinators to and we targeted non-operating women landowners. During the second learning circle, the ladies in attendance said that they could not wait the 3 months until the last learning circle, and they wanted more opportunities to meet. And so Tammy and I took that and ran with it, and that started our lunch and learns that still continue today. So the ultimate, the goal for the multi-county women in the land was to provide women landowners with opportunities to gain knowledge, skills, and confidence to engage with agricultural and conservation partners in their area. And although we do target women landowners, everyone's invited, and it's not unusual for us to have 1 or 2 men join us at just about every meeting. So sometimes that's the landowner that's hosting, sometimes that's a speaker, and sometimes that's just another person that is interested in the topic that is not female. So now I'm going to go ahead and go to the poll results and pull this over here. So we've got 22 responses, and it looks like the majority of you have less than a quarter of your customer base as women. And then it also looks like, oh, that number 2 kind of surprises me. Almost half of you are somewhat likely to ask a question in front of an entire group that you may not know everyone in the group. And then once you add in the very likely, that's over half. So that's pretty impressive. A lot of the research that we've been seeing shows that forward here. Shows that adult learners of both genders are more likely to take action when information is offered in a flexible, peer-directed focus group type setting. So they tend to feel more comfortable asking questions and sharing information with one another as opposed to a traditional classroom presentation style delivery. So yeah, so you guys defied what the research has been showing, but a lot with the majority of you not having the women-based customers, take a moment to kind of think about what % of those of your customers have women involved in the decision making or any part of the day-to-day operations. I mean, whether that's just the finances or whether that's during harvest, they're driving tractor, or, anything. That there's a lot more women that are involved in agriculture or even own the farmland that could be involved or you could be influencing to help make those decisions. So in the picture that's presented there, can you tell who the resource professionals are in the group? You can't. And that's one of the great things. And it's just like Melissa said, you know, she's there, I'm there learning just as much from the participants as they're learning from each other, and they're learning from us also. So to me, that is one of the great things about these, is that everyone has something to contribute, and everyone is learning from each other. So our targeted group, it is women landowners. And so some in our group, some are recent widows and just learning about the farm. They're having, you know, not only are they going through a trauma and learning and working on grieving, but they're also having to learn a bunch of new stuff about the farm. Some have inherited the farm from their parents. Some are new non-traditional crop farmers in Hardin County and surrounding counties. Row crops, corn and beans are the primary. I myself am a sheep farmer, and I am very much an oddball in the area. So the thing that connects all of us, though, is that each of the participants that attends, they want to learn more about conservation on their land. How do they do it? What's the terminology mean? You know, how do they go about doing things? So some of our outcomes that we've had are networks built. We have repeat customers, and they're connecting outside of our organized events. When we, I'm a firm believer that we don't, you know, if it's even if it's only an hour and a half event, we don't sit there for the whole event. I like doing 20 to 30 minute divisions of time and making sure that everybody is moving or changing or doing something different every 20 to 30 minutes. So, you know, in a winter meeting, we did reading soil tests. And so although we, and you can see the bottom right picture here, it is one of those that we had some at-home soil tests, but just we had them bring soil tests from their own land and went through how to read it, and then let them do the at-home soil test on their soil. And you know, even though they weren't up and moving around, they were able to do something different and be interactive throughout the event. We've also have, thanks to Ashley, a pollinator and food matching activity that we've done, and that gets people up and out of their seats and moving around and talking to each other, because, you know, it's all about, I strive to make sure that they're all about working together and again, building that network of people that they can ask questions to and work with. And we have a lot of confidence built within the group. So when we first started the learning circles, the participants regularly would sheepishly raise their hand and say, I have a stupid question. They no longer do that. Instead, they have a question and they don't ask it sheepishly. They're there, they talk with each other, and they work that, you know, they're not afraid to ask questions because they know that we're all there to learn from each other. And we also have one participant now that they're in the right-hand picture that is one of our volunteers. She helps set up, tear down, bring food, speak. She helps wherever needed. They were trying to start a learning circle in a county 2 counties away from where she lives, and she was riding with me, and you know, we were making the drive down there so that she could help get this started. So you have people that you in this case, I have people that have really bought into it and really find the value in this networking opportunity and working together. And then we also have a couple participants that were not previously comfortable talking with the person that farms their ground about, you know, their wishes and desires for, have you thought about incorporating cover crops? You know, that's something she had been thinking about prior to these meetings. And now after the meetings felt more comfortable and knowledgeable to be able to talk with her farmer about cover crops. And together they got a cover crop planted multiple years now. And another participant who, she was a teacher and retired, and so now she knew that she should be helping her husband, but wasn't comfortable going to the fertilizer dealer and discussing nutrient management or what needed to be done. And she has started doing that. And she was very glad that it, you know, she said it was a learning curve, but she was very glad that she did it, because here just recently her husband passed away, and now she's having to do that. And so having that base knowledge and already feeling comfortable doing it, it wasn't, I mean, as she's going through the trauma of losing her husband, it's something that she doesn't have to worry about as much now. And we're also getting additional conservation on the ground. I told you about the one that talking with her operator, and they've added cover crops to their rotation. Multiple ones of them have had their participants or their farmers come in, or their other family members come in and enroll in CSP or EQIP to do additional nutrient management practices or cover crops. You know, we have people that have put in high tunnels or have planted additional trees as conservation practices. And here just last month, we had one on pollinators, and we have quite a few of them that are now reaching out to our Pheasants Forever Farm Bill biologists to work on pollinator pollinator seedings and plantings. So it's one of my favorite things to participate in, and we try to do something every other month. The topics are pure, just like Melissa's group, the topics are purely decided by the participants. We do evaluations and a poll at the end to see what topics are next. So we've done topics on drain tile, terminology, and had samples there for them to look at and hold and figure and learn about the equipment and the different ways you can put tile, you know, that contractors put tile in. And coming up, Ohio has a big ditch maintenance program, and well, each county has an individual ditch maintenance program, but we're going to talk about ditch maintenance because a lot of our landowners, they know they're getting billed on their taxes for ditch maintenance, but they don't know what that means for them, for their land, you know, that kind of thing. So we definitely go and go off the topics that are needed from our group. So with that, I will turn it back to Ashley and Amanda and see if there's any questions in the chat.
All right, thanks Megan and Melissa. We do have some questions and comments in the chat here. So I'm going to start with the one that's an official question, and then I want to maybe get to some of the comments before we go to breakout rooms. This one is targeted to Melissa. It says, I'm curious about how the group conversations support folks in different production systems, landing on topics and speakers that support soil health discussions for advanced producers and varied production systems is always a challenge. So having variety of backgrounds and production systems at the same meeting. How do you guys go about landing on a topic for them?
Right. And so that's a really good point, especially with our no-till and organic producers. There are, some inherent differences in their crops, in their method of planting and all of that. And not every meeting, I would say, is dialed into everybody's specific interests at the time. Our last meeting was geared more towards what the host farmer wanted to hear about and learn about with grazing cover crops. And that isn't of interest to everybody in the group, of particular interest. I mean, but the conversation as a whole did at one point or another, include other things. And I still think there is huge value in just bringing everybody together, at least twice a year to make soil health topics on the front burner, regardless of whether it's, the specific topic that is a hot button issue for them at that time. So it does vary a little bit with each meeting. The meeting we had on untreated seed and things like that. Some farmers aren't there yet. Some farmers weren't ready to make that step. But again, I still think there's value in them hearing about what other farmers are doing, even if they're not ready to take that step. So I've found that just, I think the more diversity, the better, because there is something to learn from each person, even if they're not at that particular step yet. So.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just add a follow on? Do you choose the topic ahead of time, or is it sort of an organic flow? Do people know what they're
right? No, I try to have at least a loose outline, and some are more formal than others. Like when I had the 2 Penn State Extension people come down, they more or less took their topic and their research. And so those were a little more formal. There have definitely been some meetings where, it was just me kind of leading and facilitating the discussion. And then we hit on whatever, the guys are interested in talking about. But I always try to have at least a list of questions where if, I think Megan's point as far as farmers asking questions, sometimes it is like pulling a little bit of teeth to get started and get people talking. So I always have a list of questions. Well, how did this go this year? What did you guys see with this? To kind of get things started. So I always start out with at least a rough outline for each meeting.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay, we have another question in the chat. Have you been able to connect with farmers who are interested in soil health but are wary / not necessarily early adopters? What would you suggest to get those farmers in the conversations? Melissa or Megan or Lisa, since you're here too and you have experience with this, feel free to chime in.
So I think some of where I see the group in Juniata going in the future is to start bringing either newer beginning farmers or people who are slower in the adoption of soil health practices into the fold. So as the group gets more established and comfortable, hopefully starting that mentorship as we here at our field office meet new farmers or start working with new customers to say like, hey, we have this group that we think you might learn some things from your neighbor down the road or whatever. I mean, I definitely, like I said, our group has evolved as I've met people and other farmers have invited people. That's really kind of where I would love to see things go in the future, is to bring newer farmers or farmers with less experience with soil health practices into the group and into the conversation. When I was starting the group, I really wanted those guys to get comfortable with each other, not have any naysayers or people bringing the conversation in a negative direction. And so I feel as that's established, bringing newer people in is going to go really smoothly.
I'll add a little bit to the conversation. Melissa has just done a fantastic job with organizing this group down there. And what I observe at these meetings as well is there's a tremendous value in the before the formal program conversations, and then also at the end of the formal program. So, Melissa threw out some great ideas of, how to get the conversation started, and having that topic. And we do kind of allow things to go organically. But what I love seeing is at the end, when we're cleaning up the food and putting chairs away, the guys hang around. That they're lingering for probably a good extra half an hour in most cases, and having those smaller side conversations. And there's a lot of value to like Melissa said, just kind of creating a reason for these folks to get together, a couple times a year, and build those relationships amongst themselves. And it really is kind of a social support network, right? We don't really advertise these groups that way, but Melissa mentioned about, we have successes, we have failures, and these kind of small group, as the guys really get to know each other, they become that kind of like that social support network for each other too, which I think is valuable. And being able to then, bring in those new folks that maybe are going to just initially participate in those smaller group conversations either before or after the formal program. There's opportunities for that too.
And there's a lot of power in personal invitations, as opposed to just sending flyers out, that we have found, especially in these small group learning circle or roundtable or whatever label you want to put on them. In having either a participating farmer or landowner reach out to their neighbor that they think could really benefit, or you yourself as a resource provider inviting somebody personally, there's a little bit more accountability there for someone to show than if you just give them a flyer or post that on Facebook. So definitely keep that as one of your tools as well. Those personal invitations bring people in. I do want to allow time for folks to participate in our breakout rooms a little bit. So I'm going to let Amanda introduce some of the questions that we are going to discuss in the breakout rooms, while I try to smoothly and seamlessly divide you all up so that you don't even notice what's happening. So Amanda, I'll hand it over to you for a little bit.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. And so we are going to spend about 20 minutes in some smaller group discussions, and Ashley really set us up well for this in her introduction. We're going to think about, first of all, we're going to introduce ourselves so that those of us who don't know one another can kind of get a sense of where we're coming from and what we're working on. And then we're going to start with the how. What are you doing now? What are the primary audiences your work is currently engaging, and what's really effective for you in that work? And then the wow. What audiences would you like to be engaging? What message would you like to be communicating to those audiences? And finally, that bridge, the how, the brainstorm about how to expand engagements, and just sharing experiences, learning from one another. This will be kind of a learning circle model where we each have something to bring and we each have something to learn. So that is kind of, yes, we will put those questions in the chat. Thank you, Nick. And yeah, hopefully we will have a great set of small group discussions. Ashley, are we about ready to go?
We are getting there. So we're going to have we are going to have about 4 to 6 folks, and the facilitators in each one of those groups are going to be Amanda, Megan, Melissa, or Lisa. So you will have access to all of these really experienced folks. So I'm going to go ahead and pop you guys in those rooms, and then your moderator will come in just a moment. So we'll start doing that. All right, it looks like a couple folks go. Mark, it looks like you just need to join the room that we've assigned you to. Mark, if you can hear me, you might need to do a function on your end to join your breakout room.
And Ashlyn's been a great supporter of our work with women farmers in Pennsylvania. So thank you, Ashlyn. Abigail from NRCS Columbia County.